absolutely wild as Vern Gagne's All-Star Wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
You know, when I see that open, I actually do have a question that I'm going to pose to Joe Chupik when we get to that point. But we're not there yet because we're at the intro. You see, my name is Chris Tubbs. This is AWA Unleashed, the preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to telling the stories and reliving the memories of what we consider to be one of the greatest territories in the history of the professional wrestling business, the American Wrestling Association. You can see my name is Chris Tubbs. I am there. I am here. That is Polish Joe. He is there. That is Mick Karch. He is there. And here's my thing about the intro. Just watching the little clip with Vern Gagne putting the sleeper hold in, that is very clearly a choke.
No.
So
No.
Why? I mean, Vern was such a good guy and revered, but he was choking the guy. Come on.
Nope. The Gagne sleeper did not choke. The Oriental sleeper on Bockwinkel, that was a choke.
So here's my question to you, Chris, because you're certainly in line with what I'm thinking. If you're going to take the word of Polish Joe Chupik over that of Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel,
You're doing it wrong.
Come on.
I don't know where you get your news from, okay? But if I had the Heenan Television Network, HTV, that's where I'm going.
Bobby was a broadcast
He was a broadcast journalist, yes.
Right.
I'm going by what the referee, hey, they never called Vern's hold a choke.
They were bought off.
Never. Are you saying that professional wrestling can be a professional wrestling match can be influenced by outside sources?
I'm telling you that Marty Miller and his Dennis Stamp and whoever else they threw in there, they were bought off by Vern Gagne.
Yeah, I mean, when you're the boss, you got
My life is over.
Well,
actually, it was over when I started doing the podcast. But I digress.
Yeah. Well, we don't want your life to be over because this is going to be a really fun show, guys. The topic this week is Ray the Crippler Stevens. And Joe, you are a big fan of his. Mick, I know you're a fan. I never got a chance to see him because of my age range, but this is the reason why I wanted to do the podcast. This is one of the perfect examples of why I wanted to do this podcast, because I hear the name Ray the Crippler Stevens, but not really knowing a lot about him. I know the Heenan family. I know, his connection with Pat Patterson. I know the very basics, but we're going to go in a little bit deeper and more specifically the AWA connection. So we're going to get into that in just a couple of minutes. But before we do have some business to take care of. I'm going to put some information at the bottom of the screen. You guys have heard it before, but the one thing we do want to do is we want to tell you guys all about the brand new membership plan, because there's a little bit of confusion. When you sign up for a membership, that's not the same as being a subscriber to the channel. The subscriber is just hitting a button and you get the notifications, you get you get all the videos, the weekly episodes that we do, that we are going to continue to keep doing. We're going to keep doing that. There's no question. But the memberships, there are things that we want to do and things that we're going to do, but it requires a little bit more elbow grease on our end. And to make sure that we can do it, we've got a couple of memberships, $2.99 or $4.99 a month. Guys, you're going to get the live chat You're going to get a magnet and a sticker and a handwritten note from me, which might not seem like that big of a deal, but I'm willing to do it. Like, I will send you a personalized letter to you specifically, not something that's going to be typed. I mean, I'm going to sit and write it. And if you can decipher it, that's great. But I will send it to you. You're going to get the podcast a day early, but we've got some extra things, guys, that we are going to include, but they're going to be membership exclusive. And I'm telling you, for $4.99 a month, we're not salespeople, but I feel like you guys are going to be really, really happy if you do indeed sign up.
There's no question. And Joe, Chris said it so well. We're not salespeople. We're not shilling anything here. This is fun stuff, and it gets the people an opportunity to interact with us more than what you see on the podcast. And we've had so much fun with the live chats and the watch-alongs, and well worth it. For God's sakes, it's less than a McDonald's meal a month, and you won't get fat. You will not get fat if you sign
You get fat on information.
There, perfect.
Yeah.
You are a sales guy. That was a good one.
Like that.
Chris, you had said that there's things that we would like to do. We already have done them in January, and
That's true.
I have to say that the feedback and the response that we've gotten, so I don't want to say surprised me, but I'm very happily surprised at all of the great feedback, not just good, that we have gotten. I really enjoyed doing the watch along. Mainly watching it with you guys and presenting it to the audience. I feel like I'm with my buddies sitting around the cabin on an annual trip, might have had a drink or 12 already, probably a couple of gummies, and just talking about old school wrestling. That's what it felt like doing that first one. I felt like I was just hanging out with friends, excluding Coach.
That was your friend. You're looking for your cat, Mick. I haven't seen her. I've been looking for your cat too.
Cat's sleeping on the bed, and that's where she'll stay after I gave her a couple of gummies.
What, you didn't book her?
Not yet.
But yes, subscribe. You get some special stuff that we don't do here on the podcast. Watch-alongs are my favorite. And hey, can't wait to see you. Sign up, join up. Let's do this.
There you go.
Perfect. I don't think you guys are going to be disappointed. Again, $4.99 a month. You're going to get exclusive interviews, the watch-alongs, the live chat. I'm telling you guys, for $5. I mean, it well worth it. We promise you that. We've tried not to let you guys down over the last 2 years. I know that we have, but don't let that dissuade you from doing what we would like you to do in the future. Oh, come on.
Well, it wasn't our fault that we brought Chupik on the air. I mean, we were kind of boxed in at a certain point, And
I wanted to bring Joe in. Speaking of Joe, do we want to do the acknowledgments first, and then get into the pictures and kind of what happened last weekend? Because I want to make sure that we give our acknowledgments for the couple of things right off the top.
We kind of escaped the drama and the morose for a little while there, but we have a couple of passings that we want to acknowledge. One of them was a longtime wrestling fan and a contributor on Facebook pages, listened to the podcast all the time, had correspondence everywhere, and that's our buddy Scott Kangas. Scott passed away just recently. Very, very sad to hear that. He was, as I say, a regular contributor and loved old school. So to the family and friends of Scott Kangas, we send our deepest sympathies.
It shocked me a little bit when I got the email and I was like, that couldn't have been Scott. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was Scott. Because yeah, you're right. He was all over the place. I mean, if you've seen us on Facebook or YouTube, wherever, like, you saw his name, you saw him commenting and interacting with it
all the time. So he will be sorely missed. And Scott, fly high, buddy. Thank you for all your contributions and friendship. And the other passing, this one hits home with me as an old school guy, and that is Chris Markoff. And Chris had a stroke, a couple of strokes, I believe, just recently, and the prognosis had not been good. But still, when you get the news that one of the old school guys, and there he is, Chris Markoff, has passed, this one really hurt. Not only because I was watching Chris as a teenager, and of course, he was that third Dolly sister, as the Crusher called him. He was the Sweet Lips Christine to go along with Larry Hennig and Harley Race, Gertrude, and Sylvia. But in all sincerity, Chris Markoff, a tremendous veteran of this business. He went everywhere and he did everything, and that is not hyperbole. Markoff, he main evented virtually every territory he ever wrestled in. Here in the AWA, he came in and out over several years. I worked with Chris on some independent promotions up in Winnipeg, Canada. Great guy. And I know, Joe, you had a family connection with Chris Markoff. This is another great AWA veteran gone. And man, the numbers are dwindling so fast.
Yeah, Chris and his wife were a part of the Polish National Alliance in Northeast Minneapolis. And that's where I got to meet Chris. I was, probably maybe 8, 9 years old when I first met him. And I remember seeing him show up to the first meeting and was scared shitless. I mean, it's Chris Markoff, professional wrestler, guy that I've been booing for all of this time. And I remember thinking, hope he doesn't remember or know that I was booing him. A young, impressionable kid. And, that's just your thought process. But in honor of Chris, and the connection was so strong with my parents. Not that they were best friends, but Chris and his wife were invited to my wedding. They were invited to my brother John's wedding as well. But when I hear Chris Markoff's name or see him, I just think that line that he always had in his promos, "The Russians' day is coming."
And I never understood, because no sooner did he get the words out of his mouth, "Day is coming, they are here." Well, I don't know how the hell, did you transport him? I don't get it. And Chris, of course, another couple of, he would always talk about the Crusher, and he would say, "Crusher, for every kick and for every punch, I got to give you double." And just a great veteran. I will miss Chris Markoff tremendously. Wrestling has lost a superstar.
When you do a show like ours, we're talking about the AWA. It has not been in existence as a organization running live cards since 1991, 33 years. And Mick, you've said it in other podcasts. It seems like every week we're paying tribute to another great that we've lost. Obviously, we can't change time. We can't stop time. It's just, it's obviously sad, but in a shameless plug, I'm glad that we can at least pay them the honor and the tribute that they deserve for entertaining us for all of those years. So for Chris, for all of the others, for even Scott that passed away, you may not have entertained us in the ring, Scott, but you entertained us by posting a lot to AWA Unleashed. Chris Markoff never posted, but we saw him in the promos. We saw him as a manager. We saw him as a wrestler. We saw him as somebody who I hated growing up and scared shitless when I first met him. So for all of that, thank you and rest in peace.
Well, let's make a transition from someone that entertained us to someone that entertained me as a kid, and another reason why I wanted to do this is a member of. There are two, the whole royal family of wrestling. To me, you got two families in Minnesota. Got a chance to really meet both of them this weekend. Number one, the Heddigs, Lanice and Hank. We hung out, closed down. I mean, I hadn't been out that long in a long time. Felt it on Sunday, but absolutely loved it. Wouldn't change it for thing. But then we also had a chance. Couple of things here. I'm going to put this up because kind of tell us where we were all at last Saturday. And trust me, we will get to Ray Stevens, but hopefully this will answer some questions for everybody.
We were at the St. Croix Casino in Turtle Lake, Wisconsin, part of a Midwest All-Star Wrestling promotion. And MAW, first of all, great lineup again. What a great shot that is. Now, that is Polish Joe, Greg Gagne, myself, and, of course, our lead dog here, Chris Tubbs.
And there's a chronological to this, too. You are going to see you are going to see how things transpired, and hopefully we'll answer some questions.
Exactly. And, this is started out so innocently. And then it kind of went to hell. After that, we didn't anticipate it.
Well, no, I have to say before that happened, I mean, I love this picture. This is so good.
Sorry, Mick, I posted this on Facebook, and after I took the picture or got the picture taken, it dawned on me. I've known Greg for nearly 39 years, and I do not recall ever having a single photo with Greg Gagne. And I get it. I mean, I've seen Greg so many times, talked to him. It's just, he's just a friend, a colleague, somebody that I've known and seen over and over and never thought about taking pictures. Mm-hmm. This is a reminder to you all out there in this world of having a camera in your hand at all times. Take the pictures, Take the videos. They are memories. I look back at my time in the AWA and all of the talent that I had the extreme fortune of working with. I got shit for pictures. I think I got like 3 or 4 pictures of my time with the AWA. And you either had a Kodak disposable camera or a real camera to lug around. It's not something that you thought of even bringing much, at least I didn't. Mm-hmm. But in hindsight, yeah, I fucked up. I wish I would have had about 20 of those Kodak disposable cameras and, have 10 out of 24 actually develop properly and not look blurry and shit. But that still would have been 10 more than I currently have. So anyway, that's just a little backstory behind that. It was great to see Greg, former boss, former partner in the AWA, and now I'm partners with him and several others in Power Town Wrestling Action Figures. Cheap shameless plug. You can sort of see them, some of them in my back shoulder, but it was good. It was good. I was glad to have finally gotten that picture with Greg.
When Chris and I looked at that picture, I the first thing that came to our mind, Chris, you remember this?
Yes, I remember it vividly. I remember the comment and it popped me.
Yep. We have 2 high flyers. One was in the wrestling ring, and then if you would have been at the bar at the St. Croix Casino later on in the evening, you would have seen the second high flyer, the Polish high flyer. Didn't quite get off the ground for a drop kick, although he came very close to being on the ground himself. So you had Chupik and Gagne, the modern day and the old school high flyer.
Yeah.
Hey, Kettle, what are you calling the pot black for?
What are you talking about? I had a Coca-Cola and I had a glass of water.
Uh-huh.
And I got a small chin.
All right.
I'm glad you said chin. Yeah. But for those that are asking, the biggest question we have gotten maybe since we started this podcast, I get it all the time. Mick, you get it all the time. Joe, you had somebody ask over the weekend, have you talked to Greg Gagne? Are you going to get Greg Gagne on the show? I would love to get Greg Gagne on the show. And I told him as such, I'm like, I am a big fan of yours. I would love to get you on the program. However, this was the response by Greg. For whatever reason, he decided that he was going to choke me. Not the Vern Gagne sleeper choke, but he's enjoying it. So for those that are wondering if Greg's going to be on the show, I'm still hurt. I'm not going to hold any ill feelings towards Greg, even though I was traumatized deeply and it made me very sad. I'm still going to effort, but that was Greg's response.
Chris, we were right there. I heard you. You said nothing out of line. You just said, Greg, I've been a fan for a long time. Man, you are the greatest. We would love to get you on our AWA Unleashed podcast. The man snapped. You can see the maniacal look on his face as he's enjoying wiggling your Adam's apple around there and moving it to another position.
I was shocked.
It was horrible. It
wasn't even about the T-shirt that I was wearing. I mean, that was a whole nother level.
That didn't help. That did not help. And the interesting thing is the bystanders, the onlookers, several hundred, were cheering him on, and that I didn't understand at all. But you can see Greg Gagne, he's kind of lost it there, Greg, and he's got that grin on his face, but he's clearly not there. And had there been another couple of minutes, you would have not been there. So it's very interesting.
I'm thankful to be here. I'm grateful to be alive today.
I'm with you, and God bless you. You're here. You made it through the trauma and live to fight another day.
I think we need to have a rematch, Chris. I think you could take them.
Yeah, let's put you and Barry Darso in the semifinal. See how that goes.
Okay. But it's going to be me and Barry versus Joe. And, well, I know that I'll be on the outside. I'll be the anchor of the team on the outside.
Are we going to talk Ray Stevens at all today?
I think we will. But, yeah, we will. We talked to Greg, had a great conversation with Greg. What a super good dude. Oh. Super good. I loved meeting him, and he's a good dude.
He'll be on the show. Dude. We'll get him.
We're still working on getting Greg on the show.
Yep.
For anybody that's curious. It's not over. It's not over. The fat carch isn't singing. I mean, the fat lady's not singing yet.
All right. Now that we're about 20 minutes in, hopefully you guys, we kind of set the stage for it. There was a lot of stuff that happened, outside of the podcast. So let's get to it, guys. I'm going to let you guys first of all, let's kind of kick it off because I know you guys are going to carry a majority of this. I want to just ask you guys, Ray Stevens, just your overall impressions of the man that they called the Crippler.
I will talk about Ray the wrestler first, and Joe, of course, had more contact with Ray on a personal level than I did. Ray Stevens is one of the greatest in-ring performers that ever lived. And that's just not my opinion. That is the opinion of the guys that worked with him. That is the opinion of old school wrestlers who understood the business. He was a trendsetter. He was a ring general. He was a magician in the ring. At one time, he was one of the most hated wrestlers in the country. And that is no BS. In a time when the business was believable to a lot of people, Ray Stevens was as big a heel and as vile a heel as anybody. And when he turned babyface, as he did on occasion in some of the territories, he was over huge. But the point that I want to make is if Ray Stevens is not in your Hall of Fame as a wrestler, your Hall of Fame ain't shit. Ray Stevens is one of the greatest of all time. Top 3, top 4, no question about it.
As he liked to say, I'm a trucker, a fighter, and a wild bull rider. Ray, the wrestler, Mick, you hit it right on the head. He is truly one of the greats. He is truly a legend in the business, and that word legend gets passed around much more than it should be. It is more than well-deserved when it comes to Ray the Crippler Stevens. He was old school to me in the way, from the way he worked in the ring to the way that he did his promos. He wasn't the polished Nick Bockwinkel. He wasn't the comedic foil of Bobby the Brain Heenan. Ray was just a badass that would call Billy Robinson the old cockeyed coal miner, but do it in a way that when I watched an old school Ray interview, I felt like I was at a bar watching somebody talking to somebody else that's about to fuck them up. And that was just the way Ray did his promos. I'm not going to say Ray was the greatest promo of all time, but he was damn good at what he did and how he did it.
Joe, I will take a Ray Stevens non-scripted promo going out there and calling guys names and insulting Larry Hennig's family and his wife and his kids and his dog and his neighbors and everything else over any promo today. Ray was so good, and look at him there. Look at the
now. Right after he makes this, he was going to go into somebody's face, call him a cockeyed coal miner, and beat the shit out of him. Just, hey, I'm at a bar. Why not? Let's do it.
Well, and look, I want to clarify too, guys. Like, he had a great career, but we're talking about specifically the AWA years. So
exactly.
I want to make sure that's clear to everybody, because his career, I mean, spanned many years and several territories. But again, like usual, we want to focus on Minneapolis.
Chris, 42 years.
4 decades.
And there was
so how old was he then when he got into the business? Let me just
15.
I just want to.
The man was 15 years old
and lied so that he could wrestle.
There you go. And I mean, it was just extraordinary. Look at that shot of a young Ray Stevens there. He looks like he could be part of a 1950s rock and roll band. I mean, that was the kind of guy. He was so innovative. If you look at the upside down flip into the turnbuckle that virtually everybody is doing these days, and it's so choreographed. I mean, when Charlotte Flair does it, you can smell it a mile away. Ray was the first guy who did it, and it was shock value back then. He would just go flying into that turnbuckle and up and over. Amazing. His bombs away, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on as relates to Dr. X. That's that jump off the top rope and his knee drop off the top rope. Everybody is doing it now, the high-flying lucha stuff. I mean, a simple jump off the top rope doesn't mean anything anymore, unfortunately. When Ray did it, he did it with a vengeance, and he was putting guys out of the business. He innovated there. I can't begin to tell you how great Ray Stevens was. It's that simple in a nutshell.
So what about before he got to Minneapolis? I mean, what part of his career, because you said that he wrestled for 42 years. Where was he at before Minneapolis? I mean, at what point in his life did he make it here?
Ray arrived here in 1971, so he had been around a long time already, but he had been everywhere, primarily on the West Coast. Ray Stevens was legendary in San Francisco. As a matter of fact, in the 1990s, as I understand it, the mayors of both Oakland, California, and San Francisco recognized a Ray Stevens Day in honor of Ray. That was primarily where he went, but he went everywhere. He was in Mid-Atlantic, of course. He was in WWE later on, but primarily before he came to the AWA, he was in San Francisco. Now, this picture is tremendous. That says the Stevens brothers. That's Ray Stevens and Don Fargo, and they wrestled as the Stevens brothers. Ray, of course, teamed up with promoter Roy Shire in San Francisco as the Shire brothers. He did everything, and it was out in the West Coast area that he kind of made his first connection with Nick Bockwinkel. They knew each other for years and years from wrestling on the West Coast. But if you again go to Google, you can look at the championships that Ray Stevens won in this business, both before and after he was in the AWA, and it's just legendary. I think we kind of want to focus on more Ray the man and his overall impact and his legacy in wrestling.
Mick, sorry, I was looking something up, so I didn't get the full gist of what you said. But when you talked about San Francisco, Ray Stevens and the Cow Palace,
yes,
did you bring up that he held the record for selling out the Cow Palace?
I did
not just one time, but time after time after time. People paid their money to want to see him get his ass kicked. That's how good he was.
He was so tremendous. And when you mention something like that, Joe, with Ray selling out the Cow Palace, it's like Bruno Sammartino in New York and Madison Square Garden. Folks, I just can't get this point across how phenomenal Ray Stevens was. And that is classic Ray. I mean, that is one of Ray's great all-time promo shots. A legendary tough guy, as you said. But to your point, Chris, he had done a lot before he came to the AWA. In 1971, July 24, 1971 is when he debuted in the AWA at the Minneapolis Auditorium, and they made the Bockwinkel Stevens connection for the first time.
So before we get into the tag team aspect of Ray, he was a very accomplished singles wrestler, of course. Red Bastien, Jeff Ports, Wahoo McDaniel, the magnificent Don Morocco. He had a ton of feuds. Mick, a question for you. What was your favorite singles feud that Ray had in the AWA, excluding Nick Bockwinkel? I don't want to get to the turn period yet. Let's talk about the younger.
Well, first of all, his feud with Nick was not one of my favorites. It was one of my least favorites, just from an emotional standpoint. They split up the tag team for the storyline, but his matches with Red Bastien were sensational, as were his matches with Billy Robinson. Now, Red is another West Coast guy, so he and Ray were extremely close friends. Nick, Ray, and Red were great friends. So they had that chemistry and that camaraderie. You mentioned Billy Robinson, calling him the cockeyed coal miner. Their one-on-one matches were terrific. Ray would get into the ring with a guy like Don Morocco, who you mentioned, just breaking into the business. And you're in the ring with the master. And I know, Chris, this is one of your favorite pictures.
Look at that.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, I absolutely, I do. I love that picture because that is genuinely happy and guys that are enjoying themselves. And it's not stage. It's not a promo. I feel like those are three guys that are just having the time of their lives with two of their best friends with them.
And, you mentioned the friendship. And, of course, Bockwinkel and Stevens, Red Bastien and the Crusher, had tremendous feuds. The feud with Red here in the AWA, both with Nick and Ray, was tremendous and classic. But if that isn't old school camaraderie, if that is an old school friendship, and it's an emotional picture for me because these guys are all gone and they epitomize old school greatness in pro wrestling.
I can't help but look at that picture and wonder one of two things: what they had just done as a rib on somebody, or what they were just planning to do to somebody. Any idea where that photo was taken, Mick?
I would guess I would think a Cauliflower Alley event, although, it made sense, but then it looks like it could be a little bit later than that, judging by, Red's appearance. I don't know where that was taken. Obviously, maybe a fan convention or something, but the camaraderie there and the sheer love between these guys, that's what it was all about. And yet they could get into a ring and have you convinced all the way up to section 221 in the balcony, that these guys absolutely detested each other. The magic of old school wrestling.
Yeah, just a guess. I want to say that photo would have been from maybe the early 80s. Just looking at how good Ray still looked, because Ray passed away. He was young. He was only 60 years old when he passed away, 1996, I believe.
Correct.
And Ray there, I mean, you look at Nick, they both look, well, all three of them look like they could still wrestle. But anyway, that aside, we got so much more to talk about Ray. I brought up earlier the cockeyed coal miner. I used that in a classic AWA pay-per-view that I produced. Absolutely phenomenal. I still laugh when I watch that promo now. But Mick, there was another one. You brought it up earlier. The interview against Larry the Axe Henning. Go in a little more detail.
And I love that you mentioned this to Lanice and Hank when we were hanging out over the weekend. You said this to them, and I thought it popped me. I mean, it absolutely did. I love this line. I love this, what you're about to tell us.
Well, like Joe said, Ray he was a tough guy and he didn't care. I mean, this is the kind of insult that he would give a guy in a bar or at a poker game or whatever. Ray came out on television in the midst, and this is after Larry Hennig had turned babyface, by the way. So we have to put that all in context. So, Ray and Nick, they're none too happy with Larry Hennig, the turncoat, the Judas. By the way, that picture, before we go into the quote, that was at the old Calhoun Beach Hotel in Minneapolis. I took that shot, I believe, in 1971, right after Ray had gotten here. I recognize that lovely wallpaper in the back. That's where they did the old WTCN TV studio tapings of All-Star Wrestling. But in the midst of this feud, and when Ray gave a promo, Joe, you'll remember this, he kind of talked out of the side of his face. He kind of did one of those. And so envision that, ladies and gentlemen. And Ray says, I can't stand Larry Hennig. I can't stand his wife. I don't like his kids. And as a matter of fact, I hate his dog. And we've talked about this before. How bad can you hate somebody and his family when you invoke his dog? I mean, that might have sold another 1,000 tickets right there from the ASPCA lovers around the country. I mean, but this was so typical of Ray Stevens. He would just go down to the bottom of the barrel, just pull out an insult. But it wasn't like Bobby Heenan, who had a little comedic edge to the insult. Ray Stevens was outright insulting a guy, and classic.
I got to believe that after that promo, Marty O'Neill did not have to say, run, don't walk, get your tickets now. People were going to flood down there. But even without the promo, if it was Ray, Nick, Bobby Heenan, it was going to sell out. It just was. I mean, Ray Stevens, I can't stress it enough. He was as good as it got for old school wrestling.
We got a picture right up there of Wrestling Review. And back in the day, back in the 1960s, when wrestling magazines were really the thing, long before internet and dirt sheets and what have you, Ray Stevens graced the cover of wrestling magazines probably as much or more than anybody in the business. And this is before, the WWE or WWF took hold. So Bruno Sammartino was kind of the focus after that. It was kind of New York based. But Ray Stevens, he was a cover boy for many. There's another one. And we talk about Ray Stevens and the Bombs Away. And that's his signature move from the top rope. And if you saw the original movie, The Wrestler, Ray Stevens goes by his own name in that movie. And there is a film scenario against Joe Scarpello, who used the name Jack Cutter as a wrestler in that movie. And Ray jumps off the top rope with his Bombs Away right on the throat of Jack Cutter. And the storyline in the movie is that he killed Jack Cutter unintentionally, you would hope, But nonetheless, and then the sports writers are all over it. How did this happen? This is a fake sport, blah, blah, blah. But that bombs away from Ray Stevens was legendary. It was one of the most celebrated moves in the business back in the golden age.
Well, and if I'm remembering correctly, he used that move on Dr. X and hurt him badly. And because of that, the rule got implemented into the AWA that you could not go off the top rope any longer. It was an automatic disqualification. Of course, when the referee's back is turned, that dastardly Ray Stevens would still do the bombs away to injure his opponent. That bastard.
That bastard, that SOB. And there's the shot. There's the setup there. Dr. X was just turning babyface in the AWA. I believe this is 1972. And there's a match on television where Larry Hennig and Dr. X, I believe, were teaming up. That's Dennis Stamp, by the way, the late Dennis Stamp, the referee. And Dr. X, of course, has had a little bit of a change of heart at this point, and he points out to the referee that Larry Hennig had used a foreign object in his knee pad to dismantle the opponent, and he's pointing it out to referee Dennis Stamp. And afterwards, all hell broke loose. And of course, they double team, triple team Dr. X. And as you mentioned, Joe, they gave Ray the nickname the Crippler. Dr. X was going to be taking some time off. This was the storyline. And I believe he did actually need some surgery on his leg. So what better way to set it up on television than to have Ray Stevens jump off the top rope with that horrifying bombs away maneuver onto Dr. X's leg, which was tied up in the ropes. And the doc was gone, took some time off from the business, and Ray earned the name the Crippler. And as you said, the rule was changed.
A little side note for those that are wondering whether they should get the membership, the paid memberships to our site. In one of the AWA pay-per-views that we will be showing for our watch along, you can see the incident that Mick was just describing. Ray Stevens coming out and attacking Dr. X. Again, that bastard. That dastardly trucker fighter, wild bull rider.
It worked, Joe. It was magic. You didn't need all the bells and whistles and pyros and everything else. It was that simple. It was one guy putting another guy on the shelf, and as was usually the case, it was a guy that was going to be leaving the territory for a while or needed some surgery. So they set up the angle, and man, did it go over like blockbusters back in the day. Incredible. So there you go with that story.
If it involved Ray Stevens, it was going to be oh man.
All right, now this photograph. You've said many times, Joe, how Ray Stevens was a grown-up teenager, and how Ray lived by the sword. And
I don't know that I'd ever include grown up and Ray Stevens in the same sentence, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and I want you to notice there's a little blurring at the bottom of the screen. The reason for that, and I don't know if Ray's foaming at the mouth or he's got his tongue out there, but Ray Stevens was a professional motorcycle rider and bike rider and whatever. Here, Ray is actually nude, ladies and gentlemen. He's on the bike. He's having a good time. He is totally without clothes. And I don't know if Ray was revving up the motor on that, 15, 20 times to get the thrill of it or what it was at that point. But Ray Stevens is not wearing anything there.
Oh my God, I didn't even notice. Like, I would not have. I was looking at the upper body. I wasn't even looking at wow.
Yeah. Ray's in his birthday suit there, Chris.
We got to start. I think we should add a feature into each show and do a poll question. And for this one,
you really want to use the word
I don't want to talk about. Yeah, I don't want to talk about Ray Stevens' poll.
No.
But I will say, as a multiple choice, A, B, C, and D, how many drinks do you think Ray had before he did this?
Well, knowing Ray, I would say this picture is probably first thing in the morning at the crack of dawn, and he has just left the bar not that long ago. My guess is they probably woke him up, got his head off the bar, and said, "Ray, it's time to go." Right at and I again, crack and Ray Stevens' poll and everything else. We certainly don't want to go there, but Ray could pack him away. He not necessarily an Andre the Giant, because Ray was not the biggest guy in the world, probably about 5'9", 235, 240 in his day. But Ray enjoyed a beverage. And Joe, how many times have we talked about Ray smoked? He drank. He did everything. And he had a heart attack, I believe, in 1994 in the Twin Cities area. And he still didn't slow down. He still did not change his lifestyle. 60 years old is a really young age for a guy to go, but Ray went out the same way he came into the business. Talk a little bit about that Ray Stevens laugh. We talk about a teenager who loved life.
I've said it so many times on this podcast. His laugh was just a deep, guttural, infectious laugh. In fact, when I saw him on the motorcycle, after my first thought was, how many drinks did he have? Which there's no doubt Ray had a couple of cocktails, maybe dozen cocktails in him before he did that. But after he got off that bike, I can just hear that laugh, that same laugh that every day Ray and I had a contest. Who could flip the other one off first? And whether Ray did it first to me or I did it first to Ray, it was always followed by that laugh. And if I came in hungover because I had softball the night before or stressed out, because it's going to be interview day and, something is not working properly, all I needed was for Ray to sneak around that corner, flip up that middle finger and say, "Gotcha," and then just laugh. And anybody that crossed paths with Ray the Crippler Stevens outside of the ring, you heard that laugh, you knew that laugh. And if you didn't appreciate that laugh, man, you ain't got shit for a soul, because it was, that is the thing that I remember most about Ray, is that laugh. And with that, like we saw him riding the motorcycle naked, like we saw, or Mick, you had said that he passed away much too early at the age of 60. It's because he was a grown-up kid. He didn't give a shit. Ray, sadly, I think he knew that he wasn't going to live into his 80s. Hell, he would have been ecstatic to have lived to his 70s, I think. But that wasn't going to happen because of look at that face. But because of who Ray was, he just he loved to have fun, period. There's one quick story he told me about Andre the Giant that I just got to throw in here. They were wrestling at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, and Ray came stumbling in wee hours of the morning after a night of drinking, and the person at the front desk goes, "Hey, can you do something about your buddy?" Well, Ray looks over, and there's Andre passed out in the lobby of the hotel. So, as Ray tells the story, he laughed his ass off, of course, but he goes over, finds a tablecloth, takes the tablecloth off the table, goes over, covers up Andre, goes back to the front desk and says, "There, now he won't get cold."
Oh! I can see it. I wasn't there, but I can see it in my head. One thing that I remember about Ray and Joe, if you saw him back in the day as a heel, when Ray was in the ring, there's a couple of things that I remember. When Ray would throw a punch, he would hit a guy and he would take a couple 3 steps backward and then come in again. And when Ray was on the defense, he would backpedal, but he had that smirk. He had that gleam in his eye, even as he's backpedaling, as suddenly a coward in the ring. He loved what he did. And Ray was a tough guy. I mean, let's not make any bones about it. For his size and his stature and all the joking around and everything else that he did outside the ring, again, this is a motorcycle guy. This is a bull rider. This is a cowboy. This is one tough son of a bitch. And nobody screwed around with Ray Stevens.
And Ray did not shy away from confrontation. Yeah, and anybody that got involved with that, feeling sorry for you, man, because Ray could take care of himself very easily.
As we take a look at the picture of Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, and again, you talk about a legendary tag team, one of the greatest, again, top 5 tag teams of all time. There's no doubt about it. When they came to the AWA and teamed up in the 1970s, late 70s, of course, they had already had a ton of experience as a team behind them out on the West Coast and literally all over the world. Stevens and Patterson, Bockwinkel and Stevens, no matter how you toss the dice, you had some legendary stuff. I just want to, as an aside, that Paul Perchman story that I have talked about before. Paul Perchman, Playboy Buddy Rose, when he first, and this is the humorous side of Ray Stevens. When Paul got into the business, he was in I believe a tag team match in St. Paul. And Paul is standing on the ring apron and he's going to slingshot a guy who's in the ring off the top rope, by the neck. Well, as he does, then Paul descends where he's going to jump down to the floor. Well, he didn't know that there was a steel folding chair on the way down from the ring apron to the floor. And his leg went right through that steel folding chair, which buckled on Paul's leg and opened up a massive gash. I mean, from shin to knee, he was torn up. You could see the agony that he was in. Well, Dr. Ray Stevens, God bless him, Ray, who apparently was an ER guy or an EMS guy, we didn't know about that. When Paul got back to the locker room, Ray said, it goes well on that. You put a little alcohol, you clean it out. And Ray grabbed a bottle of Brut Cologne and shook it onto this open, gaping wound of Paul Perchman, Playboy Buddy Rose. Who knew that Ray was also a medical tech?
Well, he did stay at a Holiday Inn Express once, so he qualified.
Good point. Chris, I know you want to talk about the Heenan family.
Yeah, to me, this is kind of one of the big things that the casual fan, for myself, we remember about being part of the Heenan family, and then the turn. And why don't you guys take us through that timeline, and ultimately his feud with the Heenan family, and then all of a sudden how it was later forgotten in the annals of AWA history.
Imagine that. A wrestling angle being totally forgotten at the whim of a promotion.
But it was so good. It's one of them that I hear about, and you see the video, and you're like, it was done really, really well from what I understand.
Bobby Heenan had been in and out of the AWA since the 1960s. He was gone when Bockwinkel and Stevens first teamed up here for the first couple of years. And then in 1974, about the time that the High Flyers were starting to make their mark in wrestling as the top babyface team around these parts, all of a sudden, Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens, who are tired of all the double dealings by the promoters, They're tired of the contracts being switched around, not signed, and their payoffs and everything else, and their flights are being canceled, and blah, 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 blah. The whole conspiracy against Nick and Ray. Well, they had to go out and they had to get a guy that would watch over all the little minute details. And that was Bobby the Brain Heenan. They brought Bobby in. If you're going to go to a guy that you can trust, the first guy that you would think of would be Bobby Heenan. Bobby, of course, managed Nick and Ray, Bockwinkel, Stevens, and Heenan, part of the Heenan family, along with Blackjack Lanza, Bobby Duncombe. Pure magic in the AWA and into the WWA. All of a sudden, and Joe, you can pick it up from here, we got an awards ceremony with Bill Apter from Pro Wrestling Illustrated in the ring, but set up what had been going on for a couple of weeks prior to this moment.
Well, the Nick and Bobby did the old Wayne Train Bloom, I got this, on Ray the Crippler Stevens. They would do their promos. Ray would be in the background, and then Ray would try to say something. And it was either the interview was over, or Nick and Bobby would say, "Hey, Ray, hold on a sec, I'm talking," that type of thing. So they were building up the AWA. They were building up this tension that was happening within the Heenan family. And in this photo right here, Bill Apter was presenting Bobby the Brain Heenan with yet another Manager of the Year award. And by the way, that's Roger Kent in the gold jacket, George Scrap Iron Godasky in the stripes, little Bill Apter in the tan leisure suit, which is real big in the 70s. And this was, I'm guessing, looking by what Nick is doing, Ray wanted to say something. And Nick was saying, "Hey, hold on a sec. This is Bobby's time," type of a thing. Ray had enough of this bullshit. He attacks Bobby the Brain Heenan. He attacks Nick Bockwinkel. And as about a 12 or 13-year-old at the time, I was happy as hell, because finally, Bobby the Brain Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel got the shit kicked out of them and got what they deserved. And they couldn't come back, at least during that time. They couldn't come back against Ray Stevens. Now, I'm agreeing with you, Mick, that it was sad in hindsight that the split happened, because in my opinion, that was the greatest tag team that was managed by the greatest manager, greatest overall performer in professional wrestling, in Bobby the Brain Heenan. You put those three together, it did not get any better than that, and it does not get any better than that.
Joe, in this day and age, the way they set it up back then with not letting Ray talk, now everybody would be all over it. Now they would say, we can see this coming a mile away. Back then, you couldn't see it coming a mile away. And here's just a little aside. Again, it's weeks and weeks of Ray trying to say something. At the end of the interview, they're out of time, and Ray has this quizzical look on his face like, what the fuck just happened here? These guys just talk. I can't get a word in. So they're all, the Heenan family is congratulating Bobby Heenan on the award. And if you're really a student paying really close attention, I get such a kick out of this video, because Ray knows damn well he's not going to be able to talk. So when it's finally his turn, Ray says, "Bobby, let me be the first to congratulate you." And he kind of mumbles at the end, because he knows Bobby's going to cut him off as part of the script. So he's not saying anything. But it is just classic. And when they turned on Ray, and God, I love this picture. That goes back to the mid 1970s. Nick and Ray, one of the spot shows, probably in Illinois or Wisconsin, tag team champions, Bockwinkel and Stevens. But the feud commenced, and Ray actually teamed up with Vern Gagne while the short time that he was a babyface. But he feuded with Nick all over the horn for a while. And Ray, of course, got the adulation of the crowd, never won a championship or anything like that. broke my heart again because, as you said, Joe, this is the dismantling of one of the greatest factions in the history of wrestling, along with Bobby Heenan. But the interesting thing was, and we've talked about this before, a couple of years later, Bockwinkel and Stevens are teaming up again in the AWA, and nobody mentioned the fact that they had split up. Bobby Heenan, the feud never happened. There's another classic picture. We're kind of, going back chronologically a little bit. But what a great old school picture. Oh, my God. This is from Chicago. And that's Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens. I want to say 1973, 72, 73-ish, back in the glory days. And then, of course, at the end of his run, if you remember when Nick lost the title to Curt Hennig, Ray Stevens is there doing commentary at ringside. And all of a sudden, Ray kind of became the babyface, and he and Nick are protesting to Stanley Blackburn that the roll of quarters was used.
Roll of dimes.
Yeah, roll of dimes. You're right. Quarters would have killed him. But
I just don't think Vern wanted to spend $10 for a roll of quarters.
Roll of dimes was cheaper. It wasn't in the budget. You're absolutely right. But again, this is heartbreaking to me, but man, they took it around the horn. Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens, even when they were a team, Joe, the divergent personalities. You had the suave, debonair, astute, learned Nick Bockwinkel, and you had this rough, tough cowboy, Ray the Crippler Stevens, this fun-loving rodeo guy. So when they got into the ring against each other, as much as I hated it, it was a natural. God bless them both.
It was, I referred to it earlier, the joy that I had on that turn. Admittedly, I was a young kid, a young teenager about at the time, and no internet, not smartened up to the fact I was a loyal watcher of the AWA, and that turn at that time to me was the greatest turn that I had seen. Of course, I'm going to go with the Blackwell babyface turn years later. That's my top one. Look at this. Now, when we were together with Lanice and Hank Henning this past Saturday, that was 21 years to the day that Curt had passed away. And I'm looking at this, knowing that Ray passed away in 96. This has got to be, maybe 93?
I would guess, yeah, because you got Pat, who was clearly working in the WWE office at the time, and Curt is, in his Mr. Perfect persona there. So I would say, yeah, chronologically, you're probably spot on.
Oh, God. And all three of them are gone as well. But that's why we do this, to bring up those legends, the stars that have been in the AWA. And a quick little side note. So we were talking earlier about the tag team match against the High Flyers. That might be part of a watch along, talking about Ray the Crippler Stevens turning on the Heenan family. I think that's going to be a part of a watch along.
I would.
Shameless plug, but hey, I'm just telling you, if you want to see it, here's some behind the scenes stories in our commentary about it. We got it. I've seen this picture before, Mick. This is classic. And I would bet everything that I own that Ray is hungover. No, I take that back. He's still drunk.
Well, they're at a McDonald's, I believe, on the road. No boulders went through the window this time. But Nick and Ray, you talk about the friendship on the road. That picture was taken by our dear friend Joyce Postian. And again, I look at that picture and my God, I talk about emotional. Great stuff, great friends. In conclusion, I think we're kind of being redundant if we talk about the legacy of Ray Stevens, because we talked so much at the beginning about how good he was and what a trendsetter. And we don't want to overdo this, but we want to overdo this to get the point across. Ray Stevens was phenomenal in the ring. If you're a fan of the flippy flop stuff of today, you know, and everything being scripted, okay, well, you know, that's your thing. Okay. But back in the day when men were men in this business and it was tough guys, mano a mano, the legacy that Ray Stevens leaves, and watch that Ric Flair flip into the turnbuckle. Anytime you saw that, you saw Ray Stevens. You saw all the guys coming off the top rope. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Stevens was the innovator. His legacy cannot be diminished. It's just phenomenal.
You know, I was happy to know that he at least got a legacy induction into the WWE Hall of Fame. I have to say that I don't think that was it was understating by putting him in as a legacy and not putting him in as part of the main show, because Ray the Crippler Stevens deserves to be, as you said earlier, Mick, in every professional wrestling Hall of Fame. There is no questioning that. He was that fucking good.
Joe, you were friends with him. I was more of a co-worker. Had Ray on my show a couple of times, but always so much fun to talk to and so respectful. And you could pick Ray's brain about the business and never get tired. We could do months on Ray Stevens. That's how damn good he was.
What I love about, well, I was going to say, what I love about this show, guys, is I can see Ray Stevens with the Heenan family, Stevens and Bockwinkel, Stevens and Patterson. Like, he was just, where he went, wherever he was synonymous, and he was over, and he's got so many. You could look at him with, you know, several different memories depending on where you're at or where you're from. Everybody's going to have a memory, or at least know Ray Stevens connected with somebody or something. So he's never going to be forgotten.
Chris, I think, you know, the intention of this show, especially to a guy like you, you know, and when you started following wrestling closely and you swallow up history, I mean, I love that about you. You are just, you want to learn about this business. And I know we've overstated it here. Honest to God, Ray Stevens was so incredible and such a trendsetter and a trailblazer in this business. One of the all-time greats, period.
Yeah, and I think he gets overlooked sometimes in the business, because it's easy to, when you're with Nick Bockwinkel and Bobby the Brain Heenan, in a three-person faction, if you will.
It's easy to be overlooked because the other two shine so much.
Exactly. But maybe that's why, and I'll just speak for myself. That's why I might be a little bit over the top in my praise for Ray the Crippler Stevens, but he does truly deserve it. Do yourselves a favor. First of all, subscribe so you can see some of the matches that I was talking about. But failing that, go on to YouTube, find some old Ray the Crippler Stevens matches, and wrestling against Ray back in those days was an art. It was calling the matches. You know, you knew what the finish was going to be. You might, say a couple of high spots, and after you do this, I'm going to do my, my turnbuckle gimmick. But Ray could just step into that ring and deliver. Period.
There you go.
Absolutely. Let's give some shout outs here, guys, and then we will take it home. Mick, why don't you go and kick it off?
My good buddy, former comedian, stand-up comic / mailman / all-around great guy, Joe Tanner, a long time AWA fan, follows us diligently, love the guy to death. Joe, hats off to you.
My shout out goes to somebody who never wrestled in the AWA, but after this past weekend, I think he deserves a shout out. I'm talking about Bret the Hitman Hart. So he misses his flight to come to the casino, Turtle Lake, Wisconsin, and They get him another flight. He goes to Atlanta, then from Atlanta to Minneapolis, because that's the only flight and the soonest that they could get him in time to still appear after the matches to do his meet and greet. He shows up, doesn't complain, apologizes, and says, I will stay for as long as you need me. For any of the old wrestlers, former wrestlers that are listening to this, follow that lead. The fans are why you are over. If it wasn't for the fans, you would not have had your career. You would not have your glory. So respect the fans because they made you with your talent.
And he could have easily just canceled or said he couldn't make it because apparently he had something the next day, a Super Bowl party at his restaurant in Calgary. But he made it. He was there for the fans. And it's incredible when you see somebody that's willing to keep the commitment like that. And
1 a.m. 1 o'clock in the morning.
1 o'clock in the morning, still signing after a long day, but doing it because of the fans. So I think that's a great shout out. I'm going to go with the Outdated Wrestling Hour with Bob Smith. We're really proud of what we do here, guys, but we've got some of our friends have fantastic products as well. Great old school wrestling podcast. Check him out, the Outdated Wrestling Hour with Bob Smith. It's a great podcast, about an hour long or so. Just like ours, but you will not regret it. So, Bob, here's for you. And if you love this, then you guys are going to really enjoy Bob's as well. Like Joe said, we want to continue to ask you guys to become a member. We're going to have watch-alongs. Like Joe said, the only way that you can get that is become a Pinfall member, member, not a subscriber, not to the YouTube. But that's going to be $4.99 a month. You can see all of that stuff that we're going to put out there. Some interviews coming up. You want some Unleashed swag, a Slick Mick coffee cup. Go to TeePublic Unleashed Plus. We've got information and we got some products there. But I know, guys, I don't know who wants the last word. But again, today was all about Ray the Crippler Stevens.
That's the last word right there.